Welcome everybody to Patriots Law Group Live. This is where we have military law strategies for military divorce. Welcome back. We are here for another amazing topic. This is all about 5 critical actions to protect your military survivor benefits in a military divorce. And if you are navigating a military divorce and you're a veteran, active duty, or even a military spouse, we are here to provide you some education, some resources, and some tips. And we are here every second and fourth Wednesday. So if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome. And if you are back with us, we are happy to have you. So we are missing one person today. Pat is not with us, but we have Mike Lyons. And Mike, so glad that you are going to be running the show today and handling 5 of these critical actions. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Maureen. Pat had a hot issue he needed to handle in a case, and so I'm going to take the load today, okay?
Absolutely. So let's get started. We always have tons of great information on these topics, and I know with just 30 minutes, we usually run right down to the wire. So you want to start with the first critical action?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to talk about the survivor benefit, which is really an important thing because it extends payments under a military pension past the death of the service member. So there's a lot of ins and outs to it. The first tip is, or the first thing that needs to, I guess, be talked about is a court may mandate it. I bring that up for 2 reasons. One, if you're the former spouse, you can ask the court, require the service member to name me, not a subsequent spouse or somebody, a child or another beneficiary. Name me. And if it decides that that's appropriate, that's binding on the service member. However, if it's not ordered by the court and it's either silent, everybody assumed that's what would happen, or the court affirmatively says, no, I'm not going to provide that relief, then it's fully within the service member's right to name whoever's a possible beneficiary. So, the biggest problem I see with this is people just assume because other pensions have built in. But survivor benefit is not that way. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So what is number 2? That's pretty critical.
So the other thing with survivor benefits is there's a cost associated with it. At the maximum survivor benefit amount, which would allow the surviving spouse to get 55% of the service member's retirement, is 6.5% of the full retirement amount. All right. In my experience, the court.
So Mike, your internet is going out a little bit.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the court often says, former spouse, you're going to have to pay for that benefit because it's like a life insurance policy to you. Other times, the parties will split it right in half. If the court requires the former spouse to pay 100% of it, then that person and their attorney really should do an analysis of how much are they really going to have to pay for this? Because I've seen situations where the cost of survivor benefits eats substantially all of the pension during the service member's lifetime. They may be entitled to 20% of the pension, and now they're paying 6.5% of the pension, that's a pretty big chunk of, of what they intended to get in a lifetime. And it's nothing but a lotto ticket. So if the service member outlives them, they just shrunk their share of the pension by 6.5%. So, I've seen situations where people never considered that, demanded the full benefit, and then the court concluded with, that's fine, but you'll pay for it, and then came to regret it.
So in those situations, do you typically try and work it out where they walk away from it?
Yeah, typically, unless you have a really difficult spouse on the other side, or a service member, typically you calculate down a lower amount because you can set a percentage that's beneath 55%. And that's typically the answer.
Okay. All right. So what is the third critical action?
Yeah. So the third one is, if you're in one of those situations, and I've seen this, where and it happens in two ways. The amount that the former spouse is supposed to get because of what I just discussed and disability is so little that they don't even have enough in their share of the pension to pay the survivor benefit cost. And then they have to pay out they pay out of their own pocket in order to follow that order. Normally in that situation, we are able to work that out, assuming, they come to us, we identify it for our clients early enough. But if we see somebody that comes post-judgment, then we'll have a conversation where there'll be a waiver of the survivor benefit. And we deal with it that way. The other way that this comes up is if the person that prepares the pension order doesn't realize that this could happen and do the math on how this all needs to shake out, then they don't make any adjustment, because the lawyers that do this a lot, what they do is they adjust down the spouse's share, the former spouse's share of the total pension so that the cost is baked in. So if they were supposed to get 55 or 50%, now they subtract it down by half of 6.5%, which is, doing public math, this is a bad idea, 3.25%. But so we'll say, okay, former spouse, instead of your 50%, you're going to get 47.5%. And that way they don't have to pay money back and forth between the two, which ends up being a mess. You never want to be owed for the rest of your life, $100 from your former spouse, or be the former spouse that's paying it for the rest of their life, right? I mean, that's just a bad situation all around.
This seems to get messy.
Yes.
Like this can be really, really messy. And how common is this messy? Is this the messiest when it comes down to when we're looking at the finances? Because just talking about it seems to be complicated.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things, ignorance is bliss. Because what we see is most people just say, give me the survivor benefits or forget the survivor benefits. And all these details rear their head later. Attorneys that sort of know the road ahead on these points consider them along the way. We'll often have conversations with clients that say, hey, the cost for that survivor benefit, based on where we think this person's final retire pay will be, is going to be outsized in comparison to what you're paying for it. So if you're only entitled to $700 a month, why pay all that money for the hope that you get 55% of the full retirement, which might be $2,700 a month, right?
Right.
It's just a guess at that point and a lotto ticket again. So yeah, it really is one of these situations where it's complicated if you know the details, and it's mistake laden if you don't.
Do you find that most people usually walk away from them when you lay out the numbers?
Yeah, I could identify, I would say most of my clients, when I lay out the numbers and then advise, do we really want to do this? They make some adjustment because my advice is coming from the perspective of, you don't, want that lotto ticket. You want to strike a nice balance between maybe maintaining what you're currently getting. So if you're currently getting $700, setting and DFAS has really great resources on this. That's one thing that I think any lawyer that's dealing with this that doesn't do it all the time, I consult the DFAS website all the time. Or any party that's involved in this, saying to their lawyer, can you take a look at DFAS and see the ins and the outs and how it would work for me? If you haven't yet spoken with a lawyer, take a look at DFAS and then bring a printout of it to a lawyer. Most of the time when people understand it fully, and they're on the side of the ledger where it doesn't make good sense. When I say dollars to donuts, then there's some change that haps.
I want to put that website in the comments. Can you tell me the website?
DFAS, which stands for Defense Finance.
Okay, so it's all right,
DFAS.gov.
Okay, for those of you out there, it's DFAS.gov is a website that you can check out. There's a resource for you. Okay, so I'm going ahead and posting that for everybody right now.
Oh, great.
Okay, great. So that just went out to those of you who are on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. That just went out for you. And I'm going to try and get that out to LinkedIn right now as well. Okay, so we just posted it for them.
Yeah, and that website is an invaluable resource for all things SBP, also things pension and pay if you're active duty. So there's lots of great resources on there. Well, active duty or reserve, but if you're the service member.
Okay.
All right. So moving on to the fourth point for survivor benefits. And I've touched on this before, but again, this is a conversation that as we've grown more and more and more specialized in the ins and the outs of military and have evolved in our thinking with respect to SBP, we have this conversation basically in all of our cases, unless our clients are over 55. And we say, listen, you need to know if you pay for survivor benefits and you convince the court to require yourself named as the beneficiary, don't get married before age 55. And if you think you might, don't do any of that stuff I just mentioned because the SBP will suspend your coverage, your payments, and it will remain suspended maybe for your entire life, because the only way that suspension ends is if your marriage ends, the second one, or subsequent one. It could be second, third, whatever. If that marriage ends in divorce or death. So, I had a conference or a consult with a potential client. I think it was yesterday, and there's, about 11 or 12 years of overlap in the marriage, and they're both 33 years old, no kids. Prime example. Now, I was talking to the service member, but if I was talking to the former spouse, I'd be saying, think long and hard about that aspect of SBP, because it might not be the right benefit for you. A note on that, if it's suspended, then the premium suspends too. So that's one silver lining. So that would surprise you, huh, Maureen, if you sort of thought, oh, I'm going to get this benefit, and then kind of find out because you got married,
Yeah.
that you're not going to get it?
Well, I think that happens a lot, though. I mean, when you think about it, if you have remarried, you shouldn't expect to get it, right?
There's a couple ways to look at it. Some people, because the pension is under the law, at least in Maryland, marital property, we typically think of it not as like an alimony issue, but a property issue. And they mutually earned the pension. And
Okay.
the period of overlap, we generally divide in half. So some people say, well, wait a minute. The service member keeps it if I die, all of it. He or she gets back the spouse's share. But on the other side of the coin, once the service member dies, if there's no SPP, or if there's been a remarriage, the former spouse gets nothing. So some people think if you view it from a property perspective, that it's doesn't necessarily feel fair, but it's the law. So
Gotta love it.
It's the law, right?
Now, is that every state, or is it state by state by state? Every state's different?
No. So this is federally based. So
Okay.
federal rules apply no matter, in fact, the state can't change them if it wanted to.
Okay. So this is because we've talked about different states doing different things, but in this case, this is everybody has to play by the same rules.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly
Okay.
right. And I want to say, since in my mind, have a very clear fact pattern on, the remarriage piece and sort of sort people into the definitely should, definitely shouldn't categories. I want to say here, everybody's life and situation is different. And I'm giving real generalized information, really, so people can identify these issues and take them to their lawyer or to do more research on DFAS. So don't take one little piece of what I say, if anybody's out there, and run with it as it's the best course of action in their situation, or even appropriate, because I can think of a lot of situations where this may be something that a 33-year-old would want to fight. So look into it. You might be the outlying situation. All right, and these two tie together. So the fifth tip here is life insurance is a more than appropriate substitute for SPP. Okay, it gets somewhat complicated because you have to, life insurance might have a medical exam that the service member would need to take, and so you'd have to have some terms that required that to happen. And then, disclosure of info becomes touchy post-divorce, these types of things. But, if you are not, for one reason or another, SPP doesn't feel right for you, you can ask for in a separation agreement, let me go ahead and ensure, talking now to the service member, your life, that if you died, I now have a lump sum of money because the pension's going to go away. And not only is this possible, but retirement counseling for marriages that aren't, or spouses that aren't going through divorce, that the military itself often says, consider life insurance. It may be a better situation, it may be cheaper. It may be more tailored to, you could get possibly a term life insurance that's really big to cover the period when you have kids or something. And then, so anyhow, that's one of the tips that sometimes people don't really think about. They just say, give me everything I'm entitled to, period. To the highest degree, period. And then find out, I'm paying what? After it's too late. Or after they gave up the opportunity to get a life insurance policy, maybe to cover when their kids are young. On this one, I'm going to highly advise, because this is what good attorneys do, that the conversations about life insurance policies should be with financial advisors. Attorneys don't historically do very well giving tax or finance advice.
Right.
And so, but knowing that that's an option, may really make the difference between getting the best outcome versus what you thought was your best outcome, but really ended up being a hard outcome to live with as it relates to SPP.
So, these are 5. We just went through all 5 of these. Isn't it fast when we don't have Pat here?
Yeah, he just slows us down.
He slows us down, right? No, we miss Pat. So we have 5 really good actions for people to have looked into here. But I think it's really important. This is for education. I mean, we're giving you educational tips in this respect. And I'd like to ask you, in your experience, what are the biggest questions that people have when they come to you about this? Or do you find that people don't have any questions or ideas about this at all, and it's up to you to bring it up?
Yes, it's very much the latter, that they don't have any great idea about this. And here's the reason why. No one in the military has ever mentioned it to me during my service. Let me tell you about survivor benefit. And the reason is because I'm not retirement eligible. It's something that you are counseled on when you finally reach retirement. So people are just sort of floating along and thinking, okay, there's this pension benefit. That makes sense. We should share that. And that's kind of the extent of what they're thinking about. So there's a chance that the issue gets missed altogether, because somebody doesn't realize, well, I need to affirmatively have something that says, that former spouse will be the survivor benefit beneficiary. Or they hear sort of, maybe it's something online. They hear about it and they say, wow, 55%, or I keep my share of the pension, which that's a misnomer too. They just think, it just protects my share. But it doesn't. It gives you a full 55% unless you make some affirmative election that's lower. So yeah, I find that people don't really understand it in any way until we get involved.
Interesting. What do you think are some of the biggest questions you've heard when it comes to this specific topic? Once it's absolutely brought up out in the open and people are like, oh, I didn't even know about that. What are some of their biggest questions in this?
Yeah, I often get asked the question, well, why should, talking from the former spouse's perspective, why should I have to pay for it? And the truth of the matter is, normally my response is, well, sometimes the court just thinks of pensions, and this is part of it, as just divided in half, just 50-50. And sometimes, though, as I mentioned before, it says, hey, sir, ma'am, if you want that benefit, it serves you, you're going to pay for it. If you want it, you can have it, but you're going to pay for it. And clients, too, will say, well, that doesn't feel, former spouses, that doesn't feel fair to me. And so I'm spending a lot of time answering questions about why the court would or wouldn't. And we have arguments on both sides of that coin. One of the things that we'll argue for the former spouses will say, well, wait a minute, Your Honor, if this is marital property, and kind of like I mentioned to you before, and the husband, or excuse me, the service member gets it for the full lifetime, but the former spouse doesn't, well, it feels right that each party would share that cost,
Right.
in order for that benefit. If we're on the other side of it, we say, hey, the survivor benefit is 6.5. We might not be we'll let the other side explain if it could be lower if they know. But it's 6.5%. And if our service member has 70% of the entitlement to the retired pay, we say, why should he pay or she pay 70% for a life insurance policy that he doesn't have any benefit from whatsoever? So we kind of recast it and reframe it as something from a persuasion perspective. We do that. I also get asked a lot about the cost, so how does the cost work once that finally is made, once people become conscious that there is a cost to it.
Right.
SPAS has great features for that. We'll use that as our guide.
Now, can you share with people who are out there listening right now who are, this is maybe on their radar for the first time, like we talked about, most people don't even think about this. You mentioned the dfast.gov is a great website, great educational resource out there. Are there any other resources that people who are navigating a military divorce right now could go ahead and look up any additional information out there about this?
Yeah, military. Well, about this issue, DFAS is, I would say, really the exclusive authority because
Okay.
they deal with all basically, if you're making any change to your survivor benefit or electing it and all that, DFAS does it. But Military One Source is a good resource just generally for militaries across all things that may come up in a lifetime for service members, spouses, and veterans. And I would strongly recommend people take a look at that as well.
Military One Source?
Spelled out one, yes. So military, O-N-E.
O-N-E, okay. Military One Source.
Yep. Two great resources that I think can be helpful. And then lastly, legal assistance. So if you're a military service member or spouse, there's free legal assistance on base. And that's a place you can get more guidance on this as well.
Okay. Awesome. That's great. All right. So for those of you on both YouTube and Facebook, I just sent those out to you. Those are additional resources for you. All right, Mike. So we are just about coming to the end. Are there any additional pieces of information you'd like to share with our viewers on this specific topic or anything else for us today before we close out?
Yeah, no, I think that's everything. I mentioned it when we were talking about something. But we had mentioned the idea of, these are tips, generalized information. So, look at those other resources, unpack and, all the ins and the outs of it. And then go ahead and meet with a legal assistance attorney who, again, are free if you're a service member to get a better understanding. I strongly recommend against what I call DIY, do it yourself. When it's a divorce, there's just so much at stake and too many pitfalls. We are available. Other attorneys are available. But do go ahead and get yourself educated. That's the point of this, is really to make sure service men and women aren't steaming ahead on their own, not even realizing these issues exist, or are working with lawyers who just simply don't do a lot of military, and two, I think they have all the information but really don't. So that's it, Maureen. I appreciate the opportunity here.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody who's tuned in today, we are so glad that you've been here for Patriots Law Group Live. This is all about legal strategies for military divorce. We will be back we are going to be into October, the second Wednesday of October, where we will have another topic to help you navigate through a military divorce if you're experiencing it, if you're a veteran, a military spouse, or you're active duty. We also have a lot of attorneys out there who are also tuning in for the education that Mike and Pat share in this live stream. They are picking up a lot of tips, a lot of resources. So we would love to have you back because they offer great partnership opportunities. Because if you have clients out there that you need to know a little bit deeper information and you need to, have somebody to contact and partner with on that, they are here for you. For those of you who want to reach out to Mike, to Pat, to people at Patriots Law Group, go to patriotslawgroup.com and they will be there to help you move forward with the process. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And we will see you in a couple weeks with another great topic. Look forward to seeing everybody. Take care.
All right. Thank you.